Oh, I was like, where's Daryl? There's Daryl.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, big end, obviously, to this case that we've been following. When you spoke with us following the conviction, you mentioned you've never seen something so premeditated, so planned. Now that the sentencing is over, can you talk about a little bit about what went on in the courtroom today, hearing from members of Philip Rabati's family? I know, Ms. Blain-Lewis, you read a statement from Alina Radin. Can you just talk about those victim impact statements and what we heard today?
I think they were very heartfelt, and I think that it was something that the family needed to have an opportunity to do, to express what this has done to them. What often gets lost in cases such as this is the victim, and the focus is normally on the defendant throughout a trial because we have to prove what this individual did. And today was an opportunity to really speak about Philip and the effect of losing him and what it's had on the family. So I think that that was a needed moment for them all.
Can you speak at all to you reading a statement on behalf of Alina Radin? I know this is a hard trial for her, and she did testify during this case. What went into her decision to not be present today at the sentencing?
I will not be commenting on Ms. Radin's decision. I'm respecting her privacy, and I will just leave it at that.
Any thoughts on what Mr. Klein had to say in his short statement?
Well, we actually were curious if he would make any commentary today, if he would say anything. And it's clearly his decision and his choice to do so. What he chose to say, I think, was not something the family necessarily appreciated, as you were able to see the reaction. But that was his choice. Every defendant is given a chance to speak, and if they would like to show remorse at that point in time, if they would like to address the family, they have the opportunity to do so, and that was what he chose to do.
Now that the trial is wrapped up, sentencing is complete, can you talk about, I guess, doing a case like this where the defendant is representing himself, a murder defendant representing himself, the challenges that came with that, the different approach maybe you took because of that?
Do you want me to speak to them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Cheryl and I have both handled cases previously where there was a pro se defendant on a trial. And so we were very aware of the hurdles and additional issues that come with such a case. You often find yourself having to do double the duty because you are protecting the record of the defendant as well as the prosecution is trying to protect the record for themselves. And so you become very cognizant of particular legal issues as it relates to the defendant as opposed to just the people. And so that is something that is an added component to any case like this. And you're also very aware of the fact that the person who is acting as their own attorney is not formally trained, is not educated in that regard. And you certainly don't want the jury to feel less desirous of listening to their voice just because of that fact. And so you really must treat them at the same exact level that you would someone who is formally trained and who is actually educated in the law, and respect the decisions that they're making and treat them as such, because you want it to be fair, and it certainly needs to be fair. And so it just is that added level that you just have to be very cognizant of when you are making arguments and approaching the court for any particular matter, that's an additional element.
Klein did roll his eyes when you mentioned during the sentencing that he solely wanted to represent himself to speak to Ellie, to force Ellie to speak to him. What do you think of that and his attorney saying that that's just not true?
I mean, of course they can say anything they want, but if you were there, you listened to the evidence in the case, you read the email, it was quite apparent for us from, I think, the very beginning, that the reason that he did what he did was to inflict maximum pain on Ellie. Like, that was his goal. So, you know, in this particular situation, we felt like, what can he do to inflict maximum pain and then make her testify and be subjected to him again. So we felt very strongly from the very beginning that was his motivation, was to be able to, you know, ask her questions, make her talk to him again, because she had completely, if you watched the trial, she had completely blocked him out of her life. She had no communications with him. Even when he sent the email, she did not respond. She didn't want to have anything to do with him. And this was his way to make her engage with him on some level.
What about the threat of imminent danger here? I mean, during the victim impact statements, the family was saying that if the maximum sentence wasn't put in, you know, they were going to be in danger. And then also those getting the, I can't think of the word.
Orders of protection?
Yes, the order of protections ends. Can you explain more about that?
I think in this particular case, the concerns of the family stemmed from the extent that they saw Jacob Klein go through in order to commit this crime. This wasn't an individual who just decided, I was going to attack this person on any given day, on a particular day. This was a planned attack. This was a years in the making attack. And this was something that required him purchasing information on his victim and his victim's wife, which then allowed him access to their family members and the names and information relative to them as well. And so the concern, I think, is very real, that he found out as much as he could about his victims prior to committing this heinous act. And that, I think, speaks volumes to his willingness to take extreme measures to, as Cheryl said, inflict the most amount of pain possible. And that, I believe, is why they are so genuinely concerned for themselves, because of that element of this case.
Was it particularly intense sentencing today? I think we can all agree the victim impact statements were really intense and the emotions were running high, especially after he spoke in court. Can you speak to at all how the family was feeling after it was all over? I know you met with them shortly after the sentencing.
I think they are very thankful for the opportunity to have gone through this with the support that they were given, not just from the office and from the sheriff's department, but from other family members. And they were able to really celebrate that moment of everyone coming together, even despite the reason for it. This has been a long, long process for them, a very difficult process. And so having an opportunity to get together and really celebrate Phil's memory was what I think they all really appreciated and needed. And to have an opportunity to face the individual who has created such pain for them was a moment that I think they all really appreciated having, but it also is a very difficult thing to do.
Did many of them want to read and write victim impact statements?
Well, there were several victim impact statements that were submitted. I mean, not everything was read. Not everybody wanted theirs read. And of course, it's always limited. I mean, in this case, we let the judge know how many statements were going to be given or read. And, you know, he is allowed to permit however many he wants. But there were several that were attached to the pre-sentence investigation report that was provided to Mr. Klein also, that were not read, or nobody spoke in court about those statements.
So how many were there total?
I don't remember.
I would have to, it would be a guess on my part, but
And there's
more
really-
than what you saw.
And there's really no limitation to how many can be submitted. And that goes through the probation department. And so those victim impact statements will be something that will essentially follow Jacob Klein throughout his time in state custody. and will be something that can be considered upon his potential parole when he is eligible.
In the future.
Yes. Mhm.
What's next for you guys?
The next
You
trial?
mean the next trial or the next in this case?
Next part in this case.
Well, I think the next part of this case is, it's now, I will say this, it is never done, but it is complete. And we can at least say that now we have reached that component of this case. The family will continue to have access to us should they need. And we've made them aware of that, and that they continue to contact us if they need anything. Because even though he has now been sentenced, there are still things that will happen, years from now. So it will never be done, but this part is complete.
I guess my last question for you is that it seems like through this whole trial and today, you've created a very strong bond with the family and they trust you.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like to know that they were going to be working with you and having to get to that point with them?
I think it's so significant, right?
Yeah, and I think it's I mean, it's something that we do in every case, and I think some families, you create these bonds that last years, and it's just because you need to, in order to prosecute these cases, you need to know as much as possible as you can from everybody that's involved. So we've had several meetings with the Rabati family, the Radin family, everybody that was involved, people that weren't involved, to get to know, the situation as it was before, as it was after. So I don't think it's something unusual. It may look unusual to you, but I can tell you that I just retried a homicide case from 8 years ago, actually right before this trial. And I'm still very, very close to that family as well. So,
And the families need to know that we have their best interests at heart. And that is why I think it becomes so significant that they understand the process and what we are doing and why we are doing it, because they are trusting us to be the voice of their loved one who's lost. If we don't have an understanding of who that person was, it makes that a little bit difficult for us as well. And so they become instrumental in saying, this is who my loved one was. And then when they have an understanding of what we are doing, I think it all helps through the process, because they aren't questioning why we are doing what we are doing. They understand why we're doing it. And we also know the person that we're doing it for.
and we'll also stay in touch with the families throughout this process, throughout an appeal, throughout, parole, anything that happens with parole, any letters, any changes, any questions that they have. Our office will be here for that for them.
Can you comment to the words that the judge says, very strong words that usually he or any judge doesn't say, of just about talking about who Mr. Klein is?
I am impressed that the judge did have an opportunity to express his thoughts and his beliefs as well, and that he not only indicated how he felt about the defendant, but also he spoke to the family as well. I think it's also nice to have an opportunity for the judge to do so, because throughout the trial process, that's the moment that he has to engage with the defendant.
From your conversations with the family, what kind of person was Philip Rabati?
He was, I'm thinking of the video that we just watched.
Yeah.
Philip was clearly loved, and
Honorable and fun.
yes, he was an individual that I can say I have been approached by so many people outside of the family, on the street, that knew Phil, that were able to see the trial because of the press that was continuing throughout the duration of it. And I learned so much about Phil through outsiders and not just the family. which speaks volumes of the type of person that he was. He was clearly someone who had an impact on not just his family, but the community. He loved his job. He was very passionate about his work. He wanted to be a surgeon from the time he was in elementary school, we learned.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
apparently he's a terrible dancer. So we learned
But he
that
tries.
he
But
does-
he tries.
he owns it. So I think that Phil was someone who was surrounded by love, and I think Phil surrounded other people with his love. So I feel that the family will forever be missing that part of Phil, but his memory is going to be bigger than you can ever imagine.
That's it?
Yeah.
Could you mind just spelling your last name for me?
Fowler.
Oh, Wler?
F is in Frank. Owler.
Fowler?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Very much.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate it.
All right.